What's up, guys? Today we are going to be taking a look at a very frequently asked question in C++ in interviews that relates to strings. Now, this is a question that comes up in the quant space a lot at places like Headlands because they're a very C++ oriented shop, and it takes out a lot of people. This is not just important if you want to get into quant. I think any C++ developer should be familiar with this sort of question if you're interviewing and if you're not interviewing, because this might come up on the job. Now, let's take a look at the question at hand, and then we're going to discuss it together and figure out what we should be doing, because there are a lot of different ways to do this, right and wrong. So the question is related to reading strings from a file and reading a file extremely quickly. So you have a 10 million row file. We're going to call it gasstations.csv right here on the left. It can really be any formatting. All you need to know is the left-hand side is a string representing a location. The right-hand side is a temperature reading, single decimal temperature reading from negative 99.9 all the way to positive 99.9. All the floats are single decimals, meaning even if they don't carry any additional information, for example, 22 is the same as 22.0, it's still going to read 22.0. All right, now you want to read this extremely quickly and generate summary statistics. Where this goes, whether it's a database or a file, that is not too important. Let's take a look at what we're working with, the naive implementation, and then we'll take a look at ways to improve it. There are going to be a couple of ways to improve it. I'm going to talk about, I think, like 3 of the 5. The last 2 I'm going to have on getcracked.io, so the video will continue there. We have a file name, gasstations.csv. I already mentioned that. We have a record that contains a running count of the amount of entries we've seen, as well as a sum to be able to compute an average at the end. We have the minimum value we've seen and the maximum value. We then have a aliasing here of unordered map of string to records. Pretty simple so far. Let's take a look at the bad or default implementation that I'd expect from a junior or an intern candidate. So as you can see here, we have an input file stream. We take in the file name, make sure we actually got the file, that it's open, and we can operate against it. And then we go ahead and process the file. So we create the station records here. We have a string for our station, a string for our reading. We parse from the file, the station, as the string up until the semicolon, and then from the semicolon all the way to the new line character, we get the reading. We take the reading, we convert it to a float, make sure the station is or is not in our records little dictionary here. If it is not, we create a new record of count 1. We pass in the values to seed the min, the max, and the current sum. And then if it is, we simply make the required calculations. We run up the sum, we run up the count, and we find whether or not the current value is a min or a max. Now, I do have a method called time execution. It essentially takes the current time, calls the function, takes the time at the end of the function, and then prints how long it took in milliseconds. So let's go ahead and run this. As you can see, it takes around 1.5 seconds to run. Okay, not bad. But what's the issue? This is where the interviewer wants to see how much experience you have with C++ and working in general around strings. So the first issue is understanding that here we have double buffering. What do I mean by that? Well, the C++ code is currently loading the data related to the file into the file stream object that manages that data on disk. We then copy the data that's already been buffered in this input file stream into strings that we operate on. So we're making needless copies of data that we already have mapped. Okay. Then we are also doing string to float. This is also slow. It takes into consideration C locale. It allocates a string. It might throw an exception. So this is slow. And we're also using an unordered map, which is notoriously slow because of the way that it's structured. Now, the interviewer might dive deep here, they might not, but what's important to understand is it has poor cache locality because the underlying data structure is a flat array in which each bucket is a list. And we know that lists are dispersed sporadically in memory, and they also allocate. So you are definitely not going to have cache-friendly performance when it comes to using an unordered map, and that's going to make things a lot slower. When you compare an unordered map to a vector, I'm not saying use a vector, I'm just comparing them. With vector, you have a contiguous chunk of memory with one allocation at the beginning. If it needs to resize, fine, it resizes, but otherwise, it's that contiguous chunk, and therefore the cost of allocation is amortized over X objects that you hold in the vector, as opposed to an allocation happening every time a node is appended to the list. Okay, now let's take a look at a more optimized approach. So we have here version 2, and version 2 involves creating a memory mapped file. So we have mapped file and mapped file details. Mapped file details essentially holds the file descriptor and manages it. It's responsible for checking whether or not it's open. For example, like the method we saw with input file stream, I checked whether or not there is an open method. And we also close the handle via this close method. Okay, I can also close it in the destructor. That might probably be better, but I decided to go for an explicit close method here. All right. We also now have our mapped file, which manages the mapped file details or the handle to the underlying descriptor. And when we get a file path, the first thing we do is open the file for reading. We get stats related to the file. How large is it, right? We don't want to read more than what the file contains. And then we write our call to mmap. Mmap will give us a view over this file in a virtual fashion. So imagine you're reading a book. When you're reading a book, you're just moving your eyes across the page. In our version 1 implementation, we were reading a book by writing down every word and then reading what we wrote down. That's obviously not efficient. This mmap approach essentially just involves us using our eyes to read the book instead of making a copy and reading the copy. So this is going to be a lot more efficient. So we pass in certain things that we need, protected read, the size that we want to read, the descriptor, etc. We throw if there's an error. Then we also call madvise. Now, what this is essentially telling the kernel is what our read access pattern is. It's a contiguous read, so it allows it to aggressively prefetch pages. We then pass these details, our begin iterator or our begin pointer, our size of the total file that we're going to be reading, and the descriptor to details. Before we get to the data part, I want to take a look at the destructor. Because this is a RI wrapper around our handle, essentially, we check if we successfully open the handle in the destructor. If we did, we close it. And then if we still have the iterator to the beginning of our virtual view, what we want to do is we want to relinquish that virtual view back to the operating system. That's what we're doing in the destructor. In data, what we're essentially doing is we're saying, grab a C++ span or a C++ compatible view to our underlying virtual memory by utilizing the span type, which was added in C++ 20. Okay, now where are we passing it to, though? Let's ignore this for now. We're passing it to our ispan stream. So before we had an input file stream, now we have an ispan stream. Let's take a look at what we're doing. So we're creating our mapped file. We're getting our ispan stream. We are also creating an unordered map. We'll take a look at what I'm doing here. That's a little secret. This is very similar to the while loop we saw before. Instead of reading every line, we are now iterating virtually through this little view that we have here. The first thing we're doing is we're saying, let's find where our semicolon is. Now, this is also a little optimization. Why am I using ranges find and not std find? Well, when I call std find, two things happen. The first thing is that std find checks whether we've reached the end of the container that we're reading from. And it also checks whether or not we found the element in that container as we're reading every element. Now, because we know that every line will have a semicolon, we can actually add std unreachable sentinel as the second parameter to essentially tell ranges to ignore the second check, to ignore the check of whether or not we've reached the end. So we're not doing an end check. That means this can be dangerous. If semicolon is not found, then we'll run off the end of our view and we will start moving to the territory of undefined behavior. Std unreachable sentinel says we're okay with that because we know that this semicolon is in our view that we're interested in. The next thing we do is we grab from the beginning of where we started looking to the semicolon a string view. So we're not allocating a new string. We're not creating a new copy. We're creating a string view into the underlying string memory. And then we are incrementing where our iterator or pointer is to one past the semicolon. String view is a C++ 17 edition. These are all things you'll talk about in an actual interview. Next thing is we do the same thing. We find an end line, but now instead of using string to float, we're using from chars, C++ 27 edition. Sorry, C++ 27, 17 edition. We're grabbing where our iterator is, which is one past our semicolon, and we're grabbing where we find the new line, and we're finding inclusive of the beginning, exclusive of the end line. We're finding that location and we're reading it into a float. What we're then doing is we're finding our station inside our dictionary. If it doesn't exist, we create it. If it does, we simply update our aggregate statistics. Great. But you might be wondering, how can we read into a dictionary keyed on string with a string view? Well, that's why I needed a custom hash, and I also needed a custom comparison between our queried value, which is a string view, and our actual underlying value, which is a key. So equal to means that I can naturally compare the two. Yes, you can compare a string view to a string. And string view hasher is a implementation for our hash for our string view, right? The two need to compare equal for the keys to be considered equal. Now I needed to add this tag is transparent. I'm not going to go too much into it here. This could have been void. I just wrote int. Essentially the underlying mechanics for unordered map is going to check whether or not this is on our hash. If it is on our hash functor here, then what's going to happen is that it will allow us to compare the two different types to each other for the purpose of querying the key, which is a string, with a type that is not a string. In this case, a string view. So let's take a look at how long this takes. So let's go version 2. Let's run our sampling profiler again. And now let's run this. And let's see where our bottleneck is. Okay. As we can see here, we have a bunch of numbers. If you're not familiar with a sampling profiler, let me break it down for you. I actually covered it a bit in the Anthropic video. On the left-hand side, we see children. This is the amount of time that the sampling profiler was in this method or a child of its methods. Okay, so main, every time we sampled, we paused the program. We said, what does the call stack look like? Main was in there 99% of its time. Main was running. Main was the function being executed, the innermost function, 0% of the time. And that makes sense because main is the outermost function. It calls other functions. We were in from chars 15% of the time. Hint, hint. Bottleneck, it is a place that we can optimize at. And we'll get into those optimizations. Then we have version 2. So we were in version 2 somewhere in that loop, 66% of the time that the program was paused and sampled. This is how you go about optimizing. This is how you go about figuring out where the bottleneck is. Sometimes the bottlenecks are obvious, but a lot of the times you don't want it to be a guessing game because it will eventually become one. So let's go ahead and quit this. Now let's think about an optimization. So we saw that we were in from chars a lot. Instead of from chars being parsed as floats, floats are notoriously slow at being parsed. So let's maybe try to roll our own method and see whether or not there is a significant speed up. Let's take a look. So instead of using from chars, let's parse these floats as ints. So let's just say, because we know that 99.9 can be represented as 999 with simply the decimal moved back to the place that it belongs when we're formatting the string, 999 can be represented perfectly fine in int16t in 2 bytes. Let's go back to the location we were at before, and let's go ahead and implement that. So we are going to say int16t parse values. We're going to pass it our span of const char, and it's going to be an iterator to that span. We're going to call it iterator. And we're going to roll our own little int to, or string to int here. So we're going to say is negative equals iterator equals negative. If we are negative, then we want to increment this. And now we want to actually start. So we want to say int16t result. And what we want to do is we want to say while our iterator is not at that, if our iterator is a decimal, then we simply want to continue. Else, what we want to do is we want to say number iterator minus this. This will probably give us an error. Oh, no, sorry, a warning. That's okay. And then we'll say result plus equals number, and then we need to multiply that by 10 because we're moving to the next digit. Okay, and now we need to increment our iterator, and then we need to return our result. So, oh, I forgot something. If we're negative, then we have to do result times equals -1. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and try to use this instead. So where's our from chars? So let's go ahead and parse values. And let's delete this. Perfect. Okay, now let's run. And let's actually run and let's do that with perf. So as you can see here, it only took 623 milliseconds. So we went from 700 to 623. So we shaved off some time. Let's see if from chars is in that report now. Now most of the time is actually dominated by version in our loop here. But we are running faster and from chars is no longer there, so we're no longer spending time there. I can't find parse values in here, but from chars is gone. Now, there's another micro optimization here before we get to the two major optimizations. We notice that when we go down, we just have two choices to make. We either add the number that we parse and multiply by 10, or we do nothing. When do we do nothing? We do nothing when we encounter either a negative or a decimal or essentially a non-number character. So how do we actually improve this? Well, we can shift the work to compile time, and we can get that decision done then and execute that decision or the result of that decision at runtime. So let me show you what I mean by that. So auto, let's generate 2D decision matrix. And let's go ahead and we want a decision for every possible ASCII character, right? Because you can get a decimal, a negative. So we can do std array. And we will say there's 2 decisions and there's 256 ASCII characters. So let's do auto I minus minus. Okay, now we'll say, well, if I is greater or equal to 0 and I is less than or equal to 9, then we know it's a character that will result in an addition and multiplication. So decisions at I, the first decision is what? It's an addition. So it is I minus 0. That's what we're going to be adding. Decisions I is 10. That's our multiplier. Else, well, decisions at I 0 is essentially we add nothing. And decisions I 1 is 1 because we're multiplying by 1. I could have made this 2 lines instead of if and else and added a ternary somewhere, but this is probably a little cleaner to visually see. And then we can just return our decisions. And then what we'll do is we'll save that at compile time. So we'll say const expr static auto, and we'll say decisions matrix generate 2D decisions. Great. And now we're going to just replace this while loop with our decision matrix. So we're going to say, or rather this part of the loop, you can say result plus equals and decision matrix. You can say at iterator 0. So there's no branch anymore. So we got rid of the branches there. And I don't like that little plus plus there. So let's add that there. Okay. That should be the functional equivalent in terms of output, but in terms of performance, I believe it should be a little quicker. We can take a look. So what were we getting before? 623 milliseconds. 606. Okay, I'll take it. So there was a improvement, but it might not have been as big as I would have thought it would be. There are 2 other improvements. Now, if you're still watching on YouTube, you can find out about those 2 improvements that will definitely be asked in an interview on getcracked.io. This will be the full-length video placed there. This video, though, is going to end here. Thank you guys for watching.